Is it true? The martial law back in the days was not that bad?
Brother, you must be tripping.
Yeah, the martial law is truly horrible, you know.
But I heard that it was the golden days and the Marcoses were not bad.
Oh boy, looks like we need a refresher on what really happened.
Welcome to the refresher course on the truth about the martial law in the Philippines.
We truly believe that the martial law in the Philippines must never be forgotten as a cruel and unfair event for the country. With that in mind, as the center of this video, first, what is martial law? What is martial law? Martial law refers to the replacement of civil rules by military rule in particular circumstances. Although martial law has a loose and rather unsettled definition, martial law is the term used for the temporary rule of military authority in substitution for civilian rule, such as local police departments, in times where civilian authority is deemed unable to function wholly or is ineffective. Usually involved during times of rebellion, war, or natural disaster, the martial law suspends all currently existing laws and all civil authorities and administration of justices in order to control certain situations and restore stability within particular areas. With such replacements, some characteristics shown by martial law are curfews and suspension of military court rulings. And although martial law can lead to some positive benefactors, such as increased security and decreased crime rates, there are also negatives when considering the way military takes control, as they dispense extensive human right violations and unjustified imprisonment or killings. When considering the martial law of the Philippines, President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law.
To go on further, when did the martial law started here on the Philippines? And how did it start? So when was the martial law declared? In September 20, 1972, President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. declared martial law in the Philippines, asserting that it was necessary to quell civil unrest, combat communist insurgency, and restore law and order. However, the proclamation led to a period of authoritarian rule characterized by curtailed civil liberties, media censorship, and political repression. According to the facts, Marcos even staged an act of treason by making someone attack his car in the pretext of assassination, which further strengthened his reason to declare the martial law. During this time, Marcos consolidated his power, extending his presidency beyond the constitutionally mandated 2 terms. The government used martial law to suppress political opposition, leading to widespread human rights abuses. Many activists, journalists, and perceived political opponents were arrested, detained, or went missing.
So now, you would think that the martial law is made in all good intentions, but it was never truly the case. There is a positive side to it, but the good can never outweigh the bad things that happen. The benefits of martial law. The government was able to collect unregistered firearms, lessen violent urban, and put an end to the communist insurgency in some places. While martial law was in effect, simultaneously, a program of land reform was initiated and a number of significant new concessions were made to foreign investors, including a ban on organized labor strikes, declaring himself to be both president and prime minister. Based on the experience of attorney Joseph Gonzalez during martial law, the poor and rich were disciplined during the martial law era. Through massive social changes and development, such as agrarian reform, labor decrees like the labor code, and the government's use of eminent domain and police power to break the monopolies by landed states, the ruling classes, who were engaging in numerous unfair labor practices against their workers, disciplined the rich, especially the oligarchs who exploited, oppressed, and committed all forms of social injustice against the people. Numerous social reforms, particularly in the form of labor regulations and social legislations, were enacted under Marcos. The poor were also disciplined. Curfew was imposed. The young ones did not roam around at nights like what they are doing today. The core of the curriculum was work. Pupils and students were trained to work and not behave as spoiled brats like many are today. The young and the old were ordered to plant trees, and the government employees were required to render rural service in order to halt the Green Revolution. People were asked to clean their surroundings, to be mindful of the community's sanitation. No one was allowed to urinate or defecate anywhere. The people were made to respect the environment.
On the other hand, even though there were progress in this time, during the imposition of martial law in the Philippines, a lot of unpleasant events occurred due to issues of civil liberties, abuse of power, suppression of opposition, and economy. The suspension of civil liberties during martial law caused people to lose their freedom of speech, press, assembly, and movement. This also significantly affected the mass media, resulting in the closure of 392 media outlets and only allowing 3 media outlets to operate at that time. The abuse of presidential and military power resulted to human rights violation, where 70,000 people were jailed, 34,000 were tortured, 3,240 were killed, and 398 people disappeared. Suppression of opposition limited the democratic process, which also a factor why Ferdinand Marcos Sr. had the presidency for almost 21 years. And lastly is the economic issues. During the martial law period, a lot of economic problems occurred, such as decline of economic growth, where the GDP only grew by less than 1% annually. Filipino families below poverty line increased to 60%, and the skyrocketing of country's international debt from $0.36 billion in year 1961 to $28.6 billion in year 1986. This resulted to the Philippines being left out on economic progress, being outdone by its neighboring countries by a huge margin. The theft and negligence of the Marcos regime had placed the Philippines in a tough position, subjecting its citizens to the face of poverty.
Truly, it was a harsh period, but it only gets darker when we talk about the desaparecidos. Given the information that has been said, truly, it was a harsh period, but it only gets darker when we talk about the desaparecidos. The desaparecidos are the people whom was caught by the military power before and was never found ever again till the present time. According to FIND, there are at least 3,078 documented cases of enforced disappearance in the Philippines since the administration of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Out of this number, 1,165 are still missing, while 663 surfaced alive and 280 were found dead. Another example is Loretta Ann Rosales, a history teacher and human rights activist who remembers being tortured by police and the military during the martial law period. Her captors poured burning candle wax over her arms, partially suffocated her with a belt, and subjected her to waterboarding for hours on end. In her worst experience, her torturers clipped wires to her arms and feet and gave her electric shocks that made her body convulse. Now, at 83 years old, she counts herself as lucky for having survived and has dedicated her life to human rights activism and making sure such atrocities never happen again. With this, we can only imagine what other horrendous events happened to those other who was killed or never found again.
This all sounds dark and scary, but that just shows the gravity of the events of the martial law back in the day.
I see now. I guess we wouldn't want it to happen again, do we?
Well, we can try to prevent it from happening.
Oh, I know how. As the historian suggests, education and returning to our historical roots is the best way to enlighten the masses. The martial law was an event of the past, but this does not mean that people should forget the things that was happening. Thus, to why this video was made. The present must remember this and must be a lesson to never let the people involved before get back in power and to prevent this event from ever happening again, whomever is in power. But such is the present. We can see that people have little to no knowledge to how the martial law happened and to what really happened. Thus, it's a problem because the information can easily be twisted and people might actually believe it and might be exploited. Such happenings were seen in the elections wherein the party of Marcos used influencers and known personalities to make fake allegations and information regarding the Marcos martial law and the time of his regime. This made people believe even though many critics tried to prove them wrong. People of the present tend to believe those who have status rather than listening to factual information and proper research. So, what's a solution that can fix this? According to Fran Santos, a journalist for New Mandala, the cause of the said false information to be effective to people is because there is lack of foundation towards educating people in schools on what happened in the martial law. Historians long to improve the textbooks that contain the said information and towards the real happening in the impeachment of the said president. The Philippines Department of Education also removed Philippine history in its curriculum in high school, and from here we can see that the solution is simply to regain the truth in these documents and bring back the proper education of our roots. DepEd must comply in giving textbooks that has better information in the martial law for better understanding without biases, and only give out factual data by trusted sources. The curriculum must also make a better adjustment regarding teaching the young about the Philippine history to avoid further confusion. Aside from the education, people must also be presented by factual information that is easy to access and understand to prevent from personnel to distort the truth for someone's benefit.
That sounds about right.
So, do we want this to happen again?
No, of course not.
It keeps me awake, the look on your face the moment you heard the news. You're screaming